Hello, this is Good Morning Transfers. 8 days into the window, things are starting to take shape with some surprise moves on the cards. In an exclusive interview, Ivan Toney tells us he wants to repay Brentford and help them get out of a relegation battle. Timo Werner's on his way to Tottenham on loan. Will he be a success this time around in the Premier League? Mikel Arteta is questioned once again about signing a striker this month. He says no chance. And he's only been in the Saudi Pro League for 6 months. But Jadon Henderson wants to return to the Premier League. There's loads to get through today. First, we'll chat about Timo Werner's proposed loan move to Spurs at 9:15. We'll tell you about Jadon Sancho and why he still hasn't joined up with Dortmund. At 5:30, we'll assess potential options available to Jadon Henderson. At 9:45, we're asking you, what's the most bizarre transfer that has happened? Let us know, #TransferTalk, and we'll read out some of those as well. We'll be asking the panel as well, Kwaku Wafari, Harriet Pryor and Flex. Good morning to you and to those of you watching on the Sky Sports Premier League YouTube channel. Now, we start with Ivan Toney, who says he wants to repay Brentford by getting them out of a relegation battle during the second half of the season, after the support the club showed him during his 8-month ban from football. In an exclusive interview, Toney spoke in depth about his time out of the game after serving his ban for 232 breaches of the FA's rules for betting on football.
Fans have been really supportive from the club. Can you give us an insight into the kind of thing they've been saying?
Yeah, everybody's been supportive. I feel like, especially the club that was right behind me from the first bit, and like the fans behind me as well, which was a massive part. Even when I'm not at games, they're just singing my name, and I'll get loads of messages on social media and these kind of things. But yeah, like as a whole, everybody knows Brentford's a family club. They've been nothing but amazing to me throughout the whole situation. And I couldn't thank them enough, especially the fans. Like I said, they was behind me from the first minute as well. So it's kind of like I have a lot to repay.
Do you feel any kind of pressure in relation to Brentford?
Not really, no. It's no pressure. It's just obviously excitement to get back on the pitch, and obviously everybody knows at Brentford that I'll do my best to try and get the club out of the sticky patch we're in. But I don't feel there's no pressure, and even if there was, I probably wouldn't feel it, because I think that's what drives me forward. Like I said, Brentford, we've been here before. We know what it takes to get out of it.
Going into this transfer window, you are probably the most talked about player, let alone striker, in Europe. What sort of striker do you see yourself as?
All around, I feel like I'm capable of doing a lot of things. I think I can press. I think the pressing stats were quite high. Me and my strike partner Brian at the time, I think it was like one of the top two in terms of pressing. I can score goals. I can bring others into play. I feel like all round I'm capable of doing all kind of bits.
Is the European Championship a target for you?
100%. I feel like that's the aim. That's the goal, to try and get back to my form and be involved in that. We know there's other great strikers around at the moment, and they're all doing so well. But it's up to me whether I come straight back firing and put my name in the frame to be looked at. But yeah, it's just going to take hard work, dedication, and like you said, that's the goal to look towards, and being involved in that would be a massive achievement.
Well, you can see the full hour version of our Ivan Toney exclusive on the football show. That is at 11 a.m. And you can see Toney's potential return to football against Nottingham Forest live on Sky Sports on Saturday Night Football on January the 20th. Right, so Kwaku, Harriet and Flex are with us this morning. Kwaku, it was great to hear from Ivan Toney there in that exclusive. It appears that, well, he says he wants to repay Brentford. That would appear to me that he's staying at least until the summer. And I would say, personally, that's no surprise. What do you think?
It suits both parties, and I think it speaks to Brentford's position in the Premier League table right now. Brentford are currently 16th. They're only 4 points above the drop. And they're having a difficult season as a result of Ivan Toney not being there, and his goals have been massively influential. Johan Vissa's now going to AFCON, so they're missing his goals that he's chipped in with this season. And so Ivan Toney is crucial for Brentford. And if you look at the Premier League at the moment, there's a dearth of top-level strikers. So beyond Erling Haaland, who's the next best striker in the Premier League? He's probably saying Ivan Toney or Ollie Watkins. That's out of those two. And as a result of that, Brentford know they've got a hot commodity that most top teams in the league will want. Ivan Toney scored 20 league goals last season, only behind Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. There's a reason why there are so many big teams sniffing around him. But he spoke about how it's a family club and about how almost he needs to repay Brentford. And Brentford fans, that'll be music to their ears. If you think about the chance that they gave Christian Eriksen to return to top-level football, he opted to go to Manchester United the very next season. Think about David Raya pushing for a move in the summer, end up going to Arsenal. And so the fact that Ivan Toney is saying this in his interview with Darren Lewis speaks to the loyalty that he's shown Brentford as a result of them sticking by him. And so there's no doubt that Ivan Toney will be linked with big clubs in the summer. But for January, I think he's staying.
Well, what does happen in the summer then, Harriet? Because he's got 18 months left in his contract now. It'll only be a year once we get to the summer.
Yeah, first of all, I do really like some of his comments and the fact that he does seem to be loyal to Brentford after they've stuck by him and the way he talks about his manager as well. But he's made no secret of the fact that he wants to be playing at the very top level of football in European competitions, in the Champions League. So he'll be looking in summer for that big move, that big contract of his career, if, by the way, he can prove that he's still at that top level between now and then. Arsenal seems to be the name that keeps on reoccurring. We know that January, for both from a club and a player perspective, probably isn't going to be possible, that move. So in summer, you'd have to think that that link will keep on reoccurring. And in Arsenal, a lot of people are looking at them and saying they need that top level of goal scorer to take them to the next level. We watched them play last night. They were missing a lot of big chances, and someone that can just stick the ball in the back of the net would be a huge commodity. He was third only to Haaland and Kane in terms of goal scoring last season. That just speaks to just how impressive he is. So Arsenal is a name that will keep coming back, and then there'll be other Premier League clubs in the mix as well. Chelsea, I know that Chelsea will be after a goal scorer as well. Maybe he'll go there, but I do think stay in the Premier League is most likely, because he does, want to be playing in the Premier League at that top level, but also in a European competition. So it depends who's got Champions League football as well at the end of the season.
Right now, though, Flex, how happy will the Brentford fans be hearing that?
They'll be ecstatic. They really will, because I think someone of Ivan's quality being out of their team for so long, who's absolute talisman for Brentford, and the amount of goals that he scores for them, and look at the job that he's done for them. He's been such a big part of the success that Brentford have had under Thomas Frank, and with Ivan Toney at the helm of that. And to see him sort of come out sort of instantly and say, I want to repay the fans. I want to make sure that I repay Brentford's faith in me. That is what they want to see. And I think it's testament to Ivan Toney's character. We've seen there in that interview with Darren Lewis, and there's a lot more to come in terms of he wants to just get back to playing football. He wants to get back to doing what he loves. Says he fell out of football during that time, fell out of love with football in that time, and wants to get that love back. And speaks about some of the things that he's not always synonymous for. Things like pressing, things like, headed clearances. These are all things that the top clubs will be absolutely aware of. He's such a multifaceted player. He isn't
so
just
niche,
someone...
that Flex, the headed clearances stat.
I love that.
It's something that's important. When you just think of a goal scorer...
look at the different elements of my game that I can bring.
Absolutely. He's not just somebody who can... has a fantastic record at penalties and 9 times out of 10 is going to put it away or finish a chance. He can actually give a team so much more than that, which he alluded to himself. So I think the fact that Brentford fans are getting that back in a really key part of the season for them, where they've had injuries, AFCON is coming up, they find themselves, like you said, 4 points above the drop zone. It was imperative for him to come back, make a statement in terms of vocally, to say, I'm committed, I want to be here, and get his best football back. And I think Brentford fans will be absolutely over the moon with that.
What you'd also say is he's such an effortless goal scorer. I know it was for the Brentford B team, but you saw that hat-trick he scored against Southampton. It was literally men against boys. But it's so easy for him. There was 2 towering headers. There was a sweeping finish from a first-time cross. It was just the finishes that you've seen from Ivan Toney. Also a player that he likes to step up to the mantle. He takes penalties. He takes the onus of scoring goals, and that's on him. You see the top teams in the league, maybe barring Man City, they all need a striker like that. So there's no wonder why Ivan Toney is such hot property. But that interview there, it will be music to the Brentford fans' ears.
Yeah. In fact, Harriet did mention that he was linked with Arsenal. Let's just talk about the Arsenal side of things here, OK? Regardless of Ivan Toney or not, how much do they need a striker?
I mean, of course, with the game that's happened last night against Liverpool, and the fact that Arsenal had so many chances and couldn't put Liverpool away in that first 45 minutes, probably should have been 2, maybe 3 goals up in that time. Arsenal will be screaming out for a centre-forward, screaming out for somebody who can hit the back of the net on a consistent basis. I know that Gabriel Jesus has done pretty well. I think he got 12 goals in all competitions, or in Premier League goals last year, and he missed a whole big chunk of the season through injury. Saka and Martinelli were putting up really good numbers, maybe even overperformed them. Now we're not seeing that same consistency from them. And Mikel Arteta has chosen to go in a different direction by bringing in Kai Havertz, which hasn't really worked. He's given Eddie Nketiah a new contract, the number 14 shirt, synonymous with obviously the legend that is Thierry Henry, and not really choosing him in the big games and opting to go with Havertz up front. So Arsenal fans will definitely be looking at it saying we need somebody like Ivan Toney. Of course, a striker of Ivan Toney's calibre, with even more chances with the creation of someone like Odegaard just behind him and Saka feeding him and Martinelli coming off the side. It's mouthwatering, of course it is. But how realistic is that in a January where Thomas Frank has pretty much come out in a press conference and said, Ivan's not going anywhere. Ivan Toney himself has come out and said, I'm staying here. And Mikel Arteta himself has also alluded to the fact that it will be very difficult or very unlikely for Arsenal to bring in a striker. So not noises that maybe Arsenal fans want to hear, but also they have to look at the fact that the drop-off in players who were scoring last year, they created enough chances last night to win that game comfortably against Liverpool, or be in a position to win that game comfortably. Harriet would be like, we always would have come back. She's going to say that. In Jurgen Klopp, they trust, of course. But in terms of the chance creation, it wasn't a problem that Arsenal were just void of all ideas. It was just in the last moment, players like Havertz just wasn't quite making the right decision. Players like Reece Nelson. So Ivan Toney is a massive attraction for Arsenal, and Arsenal fans will definitely want a striker. How likely that is to happen, given the FFP constraints upon Arsenal from the summer, given that Ivan Toney's not available, and also what top striker is available in January. Very, very difficult for Arsenal to do.
Right, so that's Arsenal. Let's move on to Tottenham now, and they're close to signing RB Leipzig forward Timo Werner. That would be on loan until the end of the season. Right, Kwaku, why are Tottenham wanting Werner?
Lacking forward options. Obviously, Son's away at the Asian Cup this month. Manor Solomon is out of injury. He's been out for a couple of months with a meniscus injury, underwent surgery. And I think a player like Timo Werner fits what Postecoglou wants. He will make defenders think about going the other way. His pacing behind is well documented. And people forget that Timo Werner did start in a fluid Chelsea front three in the Champions League final. Champions League that Chelsea actually won, playing with Kai Havertz and Mason Mount. And despite the fact that his goal scoring exploits weren't amazing, he was the player that did a lot of work for the team. And that's why Chelsea fans really took to Timo Werner, as opposed to a lot of other players from that Chelsea team that have now left that side. So it's understandable why Spurs want to bring him in. It's almost a try before you buy as well. See how he does for these 6 months, see if he takes the opportunities that are presented. And if he does, then it will be no surprise to see them extend his stay at Tottenham, because I think he's a player that Ange Postecoglou sees traits in, and a player that he can probably get the best out of as well.
Now, Harry, you've been looking at some stats around Timo Werner.
I have, indeed. A nice walk over to the big screen now. First of all, though, it's important to think about exactly why Tottenham are looking for another striker in this window, because obviously with the high-profile loss of Harry Kane in the summer, a lot of people were questioning how they would be able to fill this void, and the main man that stepped up to that is, of course, Son, but they are very reliant on him in terms of their attacking output and their goals. 20 games this season, scoring at 12 and assisting 7 times. Richarlison, of course, coming into form. He's the next top goal scorer with 6 goals, and then you've got Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson as well, but in terms of that pure attacking output and goal scoring, they're not really up there. Kulusevski with 5 goals this season and Brennan Johnson with 1. So that brings us then, of course, to Timo Werner. He came to the Premier League with so much excitement. We can look at his first spell at RB Leipzig here. 159 games and 95 goals within that period. And that speaks to the fact that when he came to Chelsea for that big fee, I believe it was 47 million that they paid for him, they had so much excitement around him, but he just failed to really bring what was expected of him during his time at Chelsea. 23 goals in those 89 games that he played. Not to forget, though, that he did win a Champions League medal, which is not to be sniffed at. He also started in that final as well. And we'll come on to his stats at Chelsea a little bit after. But then, as you can see at the bottom there, he returned to RB Leipzig, failed really to hit the ground running when he's returned there again. He had another setback, and he had an injury just before the Qatar World Cup. 18 goals in 54 appearances in his second time there. But this season, just 2 starts and 2 Bundesliga goals across 8 appearances for Leipzig. OK, let's look at Timo Werner in the Premier League. Chelsea, as I mentioned, he went there with so much excitement, but the real story of his time there was the fact that he had so many big chances that he just didn't manage to convert into goals. You can see here, expected goals. A lot of people don't like this stat, but 18.54 during his time there speaks to the fact that he had so many opportunities, but in terms of the actual goals he converted, only 10, which was fourth in terms of the Chelsea rank. I just feel like there stylistically wasn't really the fit there between what Chelsea wanted, that really finessed and perfect goal scorer. He didn't exactly bring that, and that's why he did eventually move on. Now, why a move to Tottenham then? A lot of people have been talking about the stylistic fit between Tottenham, the fact that Ange Ball, he likes to play very direct transitional football, and we know that Timo Werner is a player that has so much pace, often got caught offside at Chelsea, which was much to the annoyance of Chelsea fans at the time. But it's potentially a low-risk move for them, an option to buy during the end of the season as well. Very good on the counter-attack. Know that he's very good at getting in behind defence as well. So a lot of reasons why a move to Tottenham would make sense. Stylistic fit, do you think? But I feel like if you look at the stats there in the games that he played, all the clubs, he's got a lot to prove, hasn't he, when he comes back?
He's got a lot to prove, but he's also got a lot to offer as well, Timo Werner, in terms of pure athleticism. He's 27 years old, he's still relatively young, probably only got 3 or 4 years left of that blistering pace, and he has to capitalise on that because we know that there's other parts of his game is lacking. But he's a player that, like I said before, Ange Postecoglou will be able to utilise, and his ability to run in behind is incredible. You saw his stats there in terms of expected goals. If Timo Werner existed in a world where there wasn't VAR, he might have an extra 10, 15 goals on that tally because he was always on that line. But as somebody who watched Chelsea very, very closely, he was a player that did frustrate, but also when Timo Werner was on, it made the Chelsea team better. He made the Chelsea team more effective. And this is a Timo Werner that's going to come back, maybe burn those bridges now with Chelsea fans as a result of going to their biggest rivals. But he can create and carve a new legacy for himself in the Premier League in a situation that's a bit more stable than he was at Chelsea, and a situation where he can go and thrive, because I think the expectations at Spurs in comparison to where Chelsea were at were just a little bit lower than it was before.
Well, that's an incoming at Tottenham. Meanwhile, there could be an outgoing. Eric Dyer is of interest to Bayern Munich. Ange Postecoglou told reporters he missed Friday's FA Cup game because of injury. Now, a reminder that if you're out and about, you can keep across all the latest deals and transfer stories on our Transfer Centre blog. And if you're watching now, just scan that QR code and it'll take you straight to it. Going to be talking about the most bizarre moves in transfer history. We've all got an opinion on it. If there's any surprise moves that's really taken you, you thought, how on earth has that happened, or even forgotten that it even happened, bizarre moves, we want to be talking about those later in the show. It's hashtag transfer talk on X, and we'll read some of them out. But there's loads on the way, including some of the stories making the back pages. Will Anthony Martial leave Manchester United? Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Time now to take a look at some of the stories making the back page. We start in the Times. They're reporting that PSG's Kylian Mbappe is exploring other options, including, wait for it, a move to the Premier League after being unimpressed by Real Madrid's attempts to push him into signing a pre-contract agreement. That's one to watch. The Daily Mail says that Newcastle's hopes of signing Manchester City midfielder Calvin Phillips on loan might have improved, with Juventus reportedly unwilling to meet the Premier League club's demands for a fee and salary coverage. And finally, in the Sun, Barcelona have been offered a chance to sign former Manchester United midfielder Jesse Lingard. The 31-year-old is a free agent since leaving Nottingham Forest at the end of last season. That rounds up some of the stories making the newspapers today. Right, to Jadon Sancho's future now. And Sky Germany's Florian Plettenberg was reporting yesterday still no agreement between Borussia Dortmund and Manchester United. He's still waiting to be given the go-ahead to link up with Dortmund in Marbella. But Flex, to you, does this still just seem like a matter of time?
Yeah, it does. It feels like, in my personal opinion, like a formality that Jadon Sancho will inevitably end up, maybe not in Marbella, but with Borussia Dortmund for sure. I think it's a situation that has obviously not been a great situation for himself personally, and Manchester United, a huge outlay on Jadon Sancho. It just has not worked. And the falling out and disagreement that he's had with Erik ten Hag after the Arsenal match, and the fallout after the Arsenal match, and then the strong statement from Sancho about feeling like he's been scapegoated and there's other reasons of which he won't go into. And basically Erik ten Hag claiming at the time that based on that week's training, Jadon Sancho didn't make the cut or the grade to be available for matchday selection. And since then, an apology just hasn't come from the player, and there hasn't been any sort of movement on that. So it's a situation that must happen. It's about getting Jadon Sancho playing football again to reignite his career. From a personal perspective for him, going back to somewhere like Dortmund, where he knows incredibly well, you know, went to the forefront of European football as one of the top wingers, top young talents in the world at that time, and rightly so, because he did the work and got that reputation. And for Manchester United, it's a chance to get them, get the player out, let him get some form, let him get some confidence, and get back into the summer and look at what that means for him, whether there's an option to put a price on Jadon Sancho. But right now, his stock has fallen so far and he hasn't played so far. I can understand the reason why there isn't an obligation or even an option at the moment for Jadon Sancho to have that. And some Man United fans may not understand that and think that there should be. Me personally, I think if a player hasn't played in so long, if Manchester United were to put a price on him now, it would be very, very low. What the hope is that he goes to Borussia Dortmund, plays extremely well, has a lovely highlight reel that's every week he's getting assists, he's getting goals, and then there's a better, stronger conversation to have in the summer as to who is the best suit for Jadon Sancho. And it might not even be only Dortmund then, it would be maybe other clubs.
Can any of you see Sancho ever playing for Manchester United again? Because I can, you know.
I think it's gone too far now. I think, like you mentioned, there's been that apology and that wait for an apology that hasn't come. The only way I think it would be realistic is if Ten Hag wasn't there anymore and then he could come back under a new manager and maybe reignite his career at Manchester United that way. But I think for the short term, until the end of the season, it feels like a good decision. And I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not having any indication on Ten Hag and his managerial position. I'm just saying that's probably the only realistic option if there's a change in manager, because the relationship between the two of them is completely broken down. He's not involved in first team training. He's not got that relationship anymore. There's no real kind of attempts anymore to try and build that back up, is there? So you can't realistically say you can come back onto that and get back to the top.
Well, he's emblematic of Manchester United's transfer policy as of late. You bring in a player for big money, expect them to perform whilst not considering the system that they're being dropped into.
Oh, he went in. I was like, I'm not saying anything. And Craig was like,
no, it's true.
No,
it's true.
And it's you can lay the blame at the door of Erik ten Hag, but you can lay the blame at so many people, and that's the reason why Ineos have come in and they've got a new ruthless strategy. Melissa already talked about it in December about how Manchester United are going to be ruthless when it comes to contracts and when it comes to moving players on that don't fit culturally. And I think that Sancho is an example of that. And as a result of that, if Ten Hag does stay at United long term, I can't see Sancho coming back and being rebedded into the team.
You can though, Tom, even under Ten Hag?
I can see him coming back. I can see him playing for Manchester United again at some point and actually still being a success. I really do.
I think the only way that could happen is like Harriet suggests, if there was a managerial change at Manchester United and Erik ten Hag wasn't there anymore. I think that's probably the only way. Football does change extremely quickly. I believe, in my opinion, Ineos' plan is to continue with Erik ten Hag at least until the summer, get some calm, get some structural changes, and hopefully Erik ten Hag can be at the helm with those changes around him and see a different look to Manchester United, a different feel. And I think if that still is the case when Jadon Sancho's loan, should it happen, which I think it will, comes to an end at Borussia Dortmund, I think if Erik ten Hag's still there, I think it'll be very, very unlikely. Unless there is a U-turn and Jadon Sancho comes back from Germany and says, I found myself, I want to move on, and here's an apology, and the two can, shake hands and move on. Football, funnier things have happened in football, but I think it's extremely unlikely.
Well, Sancho, for now, is returning to his former club. Let's have a look at some examples of players who have done the same thing. And I think it's fair to say as mixed success. And actually, Manchester United have had a few, Flex.
We have. A lot happens at Manchester United. I'm going to start right at the top with Ronaldo. I remember being on this very show a few years ago, thinking he was going to Manchester City, literally walking off set as it was pretty much done, driving home. And then when I got home, I saw Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's press conference, and I went, hang on a minute, that sounds like Ronaldo's going to come back to Manchester United. And as a United fan, even though it didn't end well in the end with Ronaldo, I'm not going to sit here and act like I wasn't thrilled. I was at his first game back against Newcastle. The stadium was electric, the energy was electric, 2 goals from him as well. And he actually scored 18 Premier League goals in his first season back and 24 goals in all competitions, that's exactly what you expect Ronaldo to do, and it was actually fantastic. Only 3 goals in the following season, so that didn't quite work out. Paul Pogba's return in 2016 to Manchester United, of course, that in the end you would say didn't work out, wasn't good value for money, ended up leaving on a free, so another bad decision. But on this day in 2012, the little midfield maestro, Mr. Paul Scholes, he came out of retirement, actually retired in May 11, and then came back in January 2012, said it was one of the worst decisions that he's made, went and bought some cheap boots from a local sports outlet, just turning up. And Ashley Young spoke about, they went to Manchester City, they saw an extra kit out, and they thought, who's this going to be for? And then Paul Scholes just walked in, and he went on the next season to win 1 more Premier League title as well. So for me, that's going to be top of the list for somebody who came back and made it work.
Yeah, some good examples there. Quaker, who have you gone for?
The return of the king, Didier Drogba. It was
Put him in Eric Cantona, mate.
It was a fitting ending to his initial Chelsea career when he scored the winning goal against Bayern Munich in the Champions League final in 2012. But he returned in the 14-15 season to a Chelsea team under Jose Mourinho that hadn't won the league title for 4 years, and he brought that much-needed experience to the dressing room. It was Diego Costa's first season. He got to learn off of Didier Drogba, and Drogba was an adequate backup to Diego Costa. Scored some important goals that season. I remember a very important goal at Old Trafford, actually, against Manchester United.
It's a foul, mate. It's a foul, that was.
And he's a player that we all know the exploits of Didier Drogba in terms of the important goals that he scored. He had a bit part role when he returned to Chelsea, but he covered himself in glory in terms of the way he handled himself, in terms of the way he dealt with the younger players in that dressing room. He was a very important cog for that Chelsea team. And if you remember his final game at Stamford Bridge, a chance for him to actually say goodbye to the Chelsea fans, he was carried off the pitch by his teammates in the 27th minute, which tells you all you need to know about Didier Drogba in terms of the legend that he is at Chelsea Football Club. And you can say that that's one return that did work out.
Well, you've just called him a king, but Harriet has gone for someone they call a god.
I was about to say, from the return of the king to the return to God. It was all in the COP, wasn't it? The banners, Copper's return, the return to heaven, whatever the banners were saying, because Robbie Fowler made his return back to Liverpool. Of course, enjoyed an incredibly successful spell between 1993 and 2001. A little bit too young for me to remember this personally, but my dad tells me all about it. So, second top goal scorer in Premier League history for Liverpool. Of course, Salah is now at the top of that list. He returned in January 2006 on a free transfer, ended up being there for 14 months. In his last season, wasn't always a consistent starter, but added another 14 goals in 33 matches to his tally, which took his total for Liverpool to 183 goals in 369 matches. Not bad, is it?
It's not bad.
Not a bad goal scoring record. Top player. And it's obviously still heavily involved with the club now. A lot of links there now still. So yeah, pretty good, and still sits right at the top of all of those record lists. That Salah is just trying to get to the top of every single one now. So.
Right, one more line from Manchester United. Clubs in Saudi Arabia, as well as Turkish club Fenerbahce, are understood to be interested in forward Anthony Martial. As it stands, United will not trigger the 1-year option they have on his contract, will consider offers for him this month. If he remains at Old Trafford, it is looking increasingly likely that he will leave for free in the summer. But now we have got some breaking news, and Hull City They're in pole position now to sign Liverpool's Fabio Carvalho on loan. Ian Rossini's side are understood to have made a move to sign him and give him a regular starting place. Hull are doing well in the Championship, actually. There's nothing official yet, but a move could progress quickly this week in the hope he's registered in time for their next game, which is against Norwich, Friday night, live on Sky Sports. But remember, Leicester and Southampton are also interested in Fabio Carvalho. But at the moment, we understand that Hull City are in pole position. Now, remember, our most bizarre transfers, OK? Get them in, #transfer talk. We'll be talking about that soon with the panel. So any shock transfers, #transfer talk. But coming up, could we see Jadon Henderson back in the Premier League?
Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Jadon Henderson wants to return to the Premier League this month, but his Saudi club, Al Ettifaq, will not allow the midfielder to leave on the cheap. Al Ettifaq are aware he hasn't settled and that he's looking at other options, but any potential move would have to work for all parties. OK, Flex, £350,000 a week is rumoured to be what he's on. Are you surprised that this rumour has come so soon after his move to Saudi Arabia?
I am, for the key reason you said there, so soon. After making that move out there, there was some controversy around it, and Jadon Henderson himself done some sit-down interviews with Adam Crafton and David Ornstein at The Athletic, sort of outlining his reasons for going versus not going. But I do think that now it's looks like it may be coming to an end so soon, it's definitely a surprise considering some of the reasons why Jadon Henderson outlined he wanted to be there, stick it out, didn't see it as a short-term thing, it wasn't about money, etc., etc. So definitely a surprise for me that he wants to come back so quickly.
Yeah, if you look at some of the reasons that are kind of being spoken about as why he's unhappy there, the lifestyle, the fact that there's 7,800 fans in average attendance this season, it's a huge shift going from playing at Liverpool in the Champions League at the very top level and then making that move over. And also for a lifestyle perspective, it's difficult, isn't it, when you're having such a big move, moving your family over. I think a lot of the time we forget the kind of human aspect, don't we, of footballers and the reasons they make these moves. So it's difficult, isn't it? But then if you look, that he did speak about that legacy and the reason he wanted to go over, said it wasn't motivated by money, but he wanted to make changes, he wanted to develop it into one of the biggest leagues in the world. And then just 6 months later, the rumours are that he's returning. It will cause an upset, and I think rightly so amongst Liverpool fans, because there's so much controversy, so much conversation around him leaving, and it feels at the moment if he does come back, it would kind of be all for nothing.
How do you think Liverpool fans will feel? That was going to be my question to you, because again, the wider community and outside of football in society will have reservations about this and questions about this, with a lot of the things that Jadon Henderson said prior to going there and some of the backlash of which he faced. But from a Liverpool fan's perspective, with the prospect of him returning potentially back to England, we don't know, what do you think that feeling is like amongst Liverpool fans?
I don't think there's too many surprises, to be perfectly honest, because I think it was one of those situations where, as I mentioned, he's used to playing at the top level. And if you look at it from a purely footballing perspective now, Al Ettifaq winless in the Saudi Pro League since late October, 28 points behind the league leaders. Obviously, there's been so much noise around other players as well in the setup that have moved over to Saudi and potentially looking for moves away or moves back. And I think if you look at Jadon Henderson, a player who still wants to be competing at the top level for his international team, and you're seeing some pictures now of him training, he'll want to give himself the best chance of being at the top level so that he can come into that Euro squad and be a starter for that team. And at the moment, from a footballing perspective, it doesn't feel like he's going to be there. But will Liverpool fans think, well, you know, this move wasn't the best view at the time, we kind of all knew that was the conversation, now you've gone and you're coming back? I think there will be upset, there will be discontent, but ultimately he might end up coming back to the Premier League. And where do you think would work for him?
I think there's a few factors that we have to look at with Jadon Henderson coming back. Obviously, the wages being a massive part of that, £350,000 a week. But I will draw back to, you know, initial quotes that he made in going there saying it wasn't about money. Would Jadon Henderson be happy to sort of subsidise that or take a massive wage drop to be able to come back and get what he wants in terms of playing time? He said that, like you said, the England squad and playing in the Euros is massive for him and wants to play regularly. Will he be willing to not make it about money and drop his wages significantly in order to come back? I'm looking at Newcastle United. You know, there was recently votes within the Premier League that didn't block, you know, the Saudi situation of players being transferred between the clubs. Could he end up at Newcastle United as a result of that? But a Sunderland boy, born and bred, came through the youth academy, but then he could go back to the northeast and live back at home. There's so much for him to look at, but wages I do think is going to be a big situation, and it depends whether Jadon Henderson is willing to compromise on them.
Oh, I think we're going to do 5 and 5, aren't we? We're coming back over.
We're going to come back to that. What we're going to do now, we're going to talk about weirdest transfers shortly, OK? So get them in. It's hashtag transfer. We've got loads coming in. It's going to be great fun when we get to this. And in fact, I think we can do 5 and 5 now, actually. So, Flex, Harriet, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to talk about West Ham, Brentford, Bournemouth, Everton and Wolves. So 5 clubs in 5 minutes. And Quaker, we will start with West Ham.
So West Ham have been linked with another Ajax player. Tim Steidten's been the mastermind behind West Ham's transfers of late. He's their technical director, and he was the mastermind behind the Mohamed Kudus move from Ajax and someone Edson Alvarez as well. Those are 2 top players that could have gone to some of the biggest clubs in the world, end up going to West Ham. And Steven Bergwijn is a man who recently moved to Ajax. His relationship with Ajax fans has deteriorated as of late. He's got decent numbers this season, 8 goals, 3 assists and 20 appearances in all competitions, but he's a player that could serve West Ham quite well on the left-hand side. We've seen Jared Bowen have to be shifted around because they haven't got the depth out wide. And Bergwijn's a player that knows the Premier League quite well, obviously, during his time at Spurs. That didn't go amazingly, but you can see him fitting in at West Ham quite well. It just depends on the wages that he's willing to take and also the amount of minutes that he's willing to maybe cut down on, because you know how good West Ham are this season.
Right, West Ham, Flex, Brentford.
Yes, I quote Thomas Frank. He said, I'm convinced that we'll be active in the market. How much? Which position? Let's see. I expect that we will be active, and I think it's pretty clear that we will most likely need a left-back. So literally Thomas Frank laying it all out there. Obviously a long-term injury to Rico Henry is so integral to what Brentford are trying to do, and he's a big miss for them. And I definitely think they'll be in the market, as Thomas Frank says. Would that be dependent on Ivan Toney? If he left, then they got a bigger budget to spend in January. Well, also what Thomas Frank has been saying in the press conferences that we spoke about on the show last week was that it would take an unbelievable offer, in Thomas Frank's words, which I don't believe will arrive at Brentford's inbox during January. And like we spoke earlier, with them being 4 points above the drop zone, was it, Kwaku? Yeah. You know, they can't be having too much of outgoing. So definitely they're going to be in the market to try and retain their Premier League status. I mean, Ivan Toney will be like a new signing, him having been, you know, absent for such a long time, his impact being missed. Werner's had injury problems, Wissa's going off to the African Cup of Nations. So definitely Brentford will look to try and do what they can within this window.
And Harry, I seem to remember this time last year, Bournemouth had a very good window. What about this one?
Looks like it's going to be a little bit quieter, doesn't it? I think if you asked a few weeks ago, a lot of people were saying Bournemouth need quite a lot, but there's been a real upturn in performance, upturn in form as well for them. But they're open to improving their full-back positions, but also looking at central midfielder and potentially another striker. Is anyone in the Premier League not looking for another striker? It feels like everyone wants a striker, but also a little bit dependent on players outgoing. Lloyd Kelly, just 6 months left on his contract. A lot of clubs seem to be interested in him. Doesn't look likely that he'll still be at Bournemouth after the end of January. And then also Kiefer Moore, manager Iriola's made some comments about a few players that are unhappy with their playing time and how much they're getting into the team. You'd have to think that Moore is probably one of those players. There's a few teams as well that are interested in him. So whether those two move out the door and that leaves a bit of room and frees up a bit of space for other players to come in is the big question. But until there's a few outgoings, you can't see there being particularly busy January for Bournemouth.
Now, Kwaku, Everton's next on the list.
Yeah, so Everton's financial problems have been well documented. Incomings are going to have to be predicated on outgoings in terms of permanent moves. But Hannibal Medri is a player that they've been looking at in terms of a loan move this January. United recently triggered a year extension in his contract, keeping him at Old Trafford until 2025. And so it makes sense that Sean Dyche is looking at a player like Hannibal. He brings energy in that midfield, and when he's made cameo appearances for Manchester United, he's been good. But Everton, despite the fact they've maybe recently struggled in the Premier League in terms of results, they have looked good. They just need to add a little bit more depth in case of injuries, and Hannibal fits the profile of a Sean Dyche player. He'll come in there, he'll slot in, he obviously knows the Premier League as well. But in terms of Everton making permanent moves this January, it's going to be difficult for them.
Wolves then, Flex, finish it off.
Yes, Gary O'Neill said ahead of their FA Cup clash on Friday against Brentford that the situation remains the same at Wolves in terms of the strict FFP constraints that they're under. He was fully aware of that as he came to the club at the back end of the summer, so he has no complaints about that. But they are reportedly targeting a net zero transfer window, really looking at loans, looking to balance the books as a sort of carryover and a carry-on from the summer. But that doesn't stop them maybe potentially looking at Danny Ings on loan from West Ham. Obviously, Kwaku spoke about some of the movement that could be going on at West Ham. He's found game time really scarce with obviously Jarrod Bowen playing up front and Antonio ahead of him before his injury. And Danny Ings, look, he's had a lot of injury problems, but what we have seen from Danny Ings whenever he's been fit, whether it be at Burnley or Liverpool or, you know, even sometimes at West Ham, he knows where the back of the net is. He's a really good finisher. And it could be something that Gary O'Neill could look at. Said Benrahma as well could be available for loan. And Cresswell as well. Aaron Cresswell, that didn't materialise in the summer when Wolves were interested then. So maybe a potential loan move there. So Wolves very much looking at loan signings just as expected as a carry-on from the summer.
Right, that was 5 in 5. On the way, we want to know the most bizarre transfer to ever happen. Get in touch on X, #TransferTalk. Welcome back. Time for a new feature. It is the Premier League Selector, which will randomly select a team for the panel to discuss. And today is, let's go.
Let's go.
Good luck. You've got to do your research for all 20 clubs for this one. Oh, one of the easiest ones. Couldn't have been better. Okay. Right. Today, that's worked out well for us. It won't always work out well, but Harriet, go on, then this is an easy one for you. What do Liverpool need?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one because I think if you look back as far as summer, a lot of people were saying they need more reinforcements in that defensive area, but midfield was such a problem area that all the funds and all the focus went on that. But now you fast forward a few months and Joel Matip, who actually was starting alongside Virgil van Dijk in that centre-back partnership, he is sustained an ACL injury, so you'd think now moving forward they will be looking for more defensive reinforcements. Jarell Quansah, he's been brought into the first team setup, looks like a really exciting prospect, really good players, look really solid and full of confidence as well. Some of his interviews he's kind of suggested he feels ready for that step up into the first team, but longer term I do feel like more is needed because Joe Gomez, we know how versatile he is. He can obviously play at centre back, but he's often needed to fill in at right back if Trent's moved into midfield area, or at the moment he's at left back because both Tsimikas and Robertson are out. Some people are saying left back position, but I think that would be just a bit too short term because you have got Andy Robertson hopefully back in January, and then Tsimikas will come back as well. He sustained an injury. So yes, central defence and then perhaps a right back if the long term plan is to move Trent into that midfield position.
A lot of people talk about Owen Beck at left back. I haven't seen enough of him, but apparently he's a lot of quality. And of course, Calvin Ramsey right back out on loan, but that's for the full season, isn't it? The full season.
Conor
Okay,
Bradley
so
that
was
was
of course, yeah. Actually, I was speaking to Michael O'Neill the other day. Actually, bumped into the first time, and he was saying how much he rates him.
Yeah, well, a few of them got a chance to show what they're capable of last night, and I love it when they bring on the young players and everyone looks at them and they're like, oh, they have got some really talented players, and Quansah's done that this season, and a couple of names you mentioned there will definitely come through. But you always need that bit of experience and people from them to learn from as well.
Right. Good to hear. OK, that was our selector today. It was Liverpool, but now we've been asking what's the weirdest transfer that has happened. This is a question that we posed on the Sky Sports Instagram page yesterday. It got thousands of you involved, and loads of you have been tweeting us #TransferTalk. Just to prove it, before we get to the panel, Zoe Pearson says Stephen Colker to Liverpool was an unexpected move. We've had James Merton says Gregor Raziak and Andy Booth to Tottenham. He says they didn't work out, but Rafa van der Vaart was a big shock to Tottenham. That one did work out. Ethan says Kieran Trippier to Newcastle. Barry says Paulinho to Barcelona. We've got loads here, but who go first? Quaker, do you want to go first? What's your one that you've picked out?
This one was one of the most infamous transfers of all time. You would have expected the players of this quality, Tevez and Mascherano, would it be the Nou Camp, would it be the Bernabeu? No, it was Upton Park. Ended up going to West Ham in one of the most bizarre transfers of all time in 2006. Both 22 years old at the time, off the back of a really good World Cup for Argentina in Germany. And it appeared on the face of it, they had moved from Corinthians to West Ham. There was a third party involved, and West Ham had to pay the price for that in the form of a hefty fine. But Tevez did manage to keep West Ham up on the final day of the season.
At Old Trafford.
At Old Trafford against Manchester United. Eventually, he did move on to Manchester United as well and had a few good seasons at the club. But I remember seeing this come through, Tevez and Mascherano joining West Ham, and it was just very, very strange. These are players that could have gone and played for anybody, but were playing for West Ham. And there's a reason why they're both remembered quite fondly by West Ham faithful, because, like I said, Tevez did keep them up on the final day of the season.
Iconic picture.
It is. Yeah, I remember it was a real wow moment.
What on earth is happening?
It's a really good example, that one. Chris says Eric Choupo-Moting, he joined Stoke, hardly played, but then he went to Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern Munich after that, and he just ends it by saying bizarre. Fernando Torres leaving Liverpool for Chelsea as well. That's from Wayne. Robbie says in the WSL, Alex Morgan to Tottenham. In the Premier League, Janino to Middlesbrough, which of course happened twice. And Barry says Christian Eriksen to Brentford. Right, Harriet, your turn.
I've gone for Diego Costa because I just want to talk about this announcement video.
Sorry, we're doing it. I've done the wrong order.
I'll take it from there then.
Sorry, I've done the wrong order. Right, Flex.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas Gravesen, as you can see there, went to Real Madrid from Everton, and it was one of the most bizarre transfers. And also, it was after the Makelele sort of went to Chelsea and they're looking for that next holding midfielder. And I don't think many people in world football, European football, would have thought it would have been Thomas Gravesen, who was actually really influential and a strong, good player at Everton. But that definitely, £2.5 million, 2005, that raised a lot of eyebrows.
Right, very quickly, Harriet, we know who you're going for.
Yeah, iconic announcement video, wasn't it, with the Wolves? He actually said he was quite scared that one of the Wolves at any point was going to jump over him. Came on a free transfer. Wolves needed a few more options in an attacking sense, didn't they? A return to the Premier League. be, but probably not to the location we expected. Incredible.
Right, OK, we might revisit that at Transfer Talk, which is coming up at 12 o'clock. But Good Morning Transfers is tomorrow, 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock. And Transfer Talk is at midday with this team. And remember, you've got Transfer Show at 5 o'clock and 7 p.m. So lots still to come today here on Sky Sports News with our transfer coverage.